We have reached another milestone in the season, now with only 5 more matches left to go. So let's get started with the weekly recap. Welcome back everyone. Round 10 is now over, and as was already hinted at, we are nearing the end of the regular season. Soon, teams will have their spots in the playoffs secured. Soon, those not destined for greatness will be cast aside in preparation for the playoffs to come, which unfortunately may have happened as we lose another coach in the chaos of the warp. The necromantic coach, who is also known as the worst coach, vanished without a trace, and without the necromancer's undead magic to sustain them, so too did their team. Thankfully, with enough dead players throughout the season, and the legendary Jim Johnson lending a little of his own undead powers, we have managed to reanimate some punching bags with legs for the other teams to enjoy. The season now can continue on, and with the teams ever more desperate to claim their spot in the playoffs, with only a few matches left to go, anything can happen in the weeks to come. So with that said, let's get into our matches and see what happened this week. The conspiracy continues, as stealing the spotlight for our match is Omega Eta Alpha going up against Fluffy Green. This is sure to start off the rounds in a good old-fashioned bash fest, but with Omega Eta Alpha yet to secure a win, they are looking to be the underdogs of this match against the mighty Green Tide. With the offensive drive, Omega Alpha gets a strong start by removing the Orcs team mascot, Mr. Fluffy, from the field, requiring the immediate aid of their apothecary to tend to his wounds. Even with the blow to their lines, the Orcs proved their dominance in this matchup, as they simply overwhelmed the undead shortly afterwards, before sacking the ball from Lamar's hands. Once the Greenskins got their ball, nothing could stop them from securing the 1-0 lead going into the second half. Despite the Orcs' dominance in the first half so far, casualties were incredibly light for the next kickoff, with both teams still able to field their full 11 players onto the pitch. But this half takes an incredible turn early on, for with the inclusion of Dribblesnuff for the Orc team, he succeeds in bringing us a memorable match by knocking himself out of the game, with the help from Bluto, who was kind enough to return the bomb back to its owner. Omega Alpha immediately dived for the ball afterwards, turning the match into an all-out brawl to see who would get the glory of the touchdown. It was very promising for the undead, but a ballsy attempt at a pass in blind daylight thwarts those dreams. And when disaster continues to strike on Omega Alpha, there was nothing they could do but let Fluffy Green score the touchdown, securing their victory 2-0. For our next match, we have the Leglickers going up against How Not to Contain Lizards to decide which of these two teams will get to keep their spot in the top 3 rankings. On paper, both these teams are fairly evenly matched, with the Amazons utilizing a heavy amount of guard players to punch above their weight, and the Source having an unnatural amount of dodge players to keep their powerhouses on their feet. But like all matches against the Lizards, how quickly the Skinks fall can single-handedly decide this match, and with easy means to push them along the edge of the field, the ladies get an early advantage in numbers. However, the ladies succumb to their own injuries as well, but with the Skinks' removal so far, they managed to quickly get behind the Source with the opening on the sidelines. The Contained Lizards were able to recover, and nearly was able to pry the ball away from the Lustrian neighbors, but Vistor was eventually able to get away from the Source blockers to score the first touchdown of the match. With time to spare in the first half, and a little favoring from Nuffle with a touchback, the Lizards aggressively dived into the Amazons' backfield, allowing them to quickly equalize the score going into the second half. Down 2 Skinks for the next kickoff, and down 1 player compared to the Leglickers. This is still very much an even fight for the Lizardmen, and with a death to signal the start of the half, everyone knew what to expect. Amazons surrounded lizards in a battle for control, while openings in the gap allowed for early pressure on the vulnerable skinks. The skinks were easily able to play a game of keep away from the slower ladies though, and with a vital tackle from Vivian Aja, saw Catalina sprint through the field to quickly secure the Lizards' second touchdown of the match. There was still plenty of the match left to go, as the Leglickers sought to avoid a crushing defeat to the Lizards. With a risky pass, the Amazons managed to get the ball behind the Lizards. However, no one expected a dodge from Erica, coming out of nowhere to sack down Signy, allowing the Lizards to successfully steal the ball. Hell responds by taking down the ambitious skink as Pirate Joe's team aims to stall out the clock in hopes of securing a win. More and more Amazons pour in to join the brawl for the ball, but eventually Hell was able to overwhelm the Reptilians to tie out the game in the final moments of the match.
How long Juvenile gets to live.
Moving on, we have the Cursed Suffering going up against the Jailhouse Rockers, which very much should be a slaughter, as plenty of goblins are likely to be brutally shredded in this match. But the Rockers cannot be underestimated, for First Degree has grown a pair of sharp claws to complement his power on the field, immediately demonstrating just how dangerous he truly is.
Well, he injures. Nagel. Fuck it.
Although the same could not be said for the rest of the Rockers, for goblins were very much feinting injuries in a desperate hope to avoid being on the receiving end of the dwarves. Despite all this though, the Underworld team managed to use their great speed to quickly get them through their lines, as Violet scores an early touchdown for the team.
Congratulations on the touchdown.
Yeah. At least I got a point.
Already down to 8 players so early on, even a perfect defense could not help from the retaliation that is the Cursed Suffering, effortlessly taking more players off the field before tying up the game going into the second half. Now down to 6 players, and more certain to join them, things continue to take a turn for the worse for the Rockers, as the Sufferers steamrolled their way into a 2-1 lead early in the half, which in turn prompts the Skaven to attempt launching their Goblin on their offensive drive.
Time for bullshit play.
Is the Joel going to be smart enough for it? Yep.
No! He makes it!
Yep. Nice one turn.
Turning the failed stunt from previous attempts into gloriously tying up the game. Somehow still retaining their 6 players after that achievement that is their 1-turn touchdown, the Sufferers simply run over the Rats once more to allow for one final touchdown to secure the victory at 3-2. Unfortunately, we have no live footage for our next match between the Large Legends and the Brightwings, but continuing the theme of unexpected results, the Brightwings not only survived against the Ogres, but also won the match 0-1, even with the Legends feeling Nabla, whose only known contribution was knocking himself out with his own chainsaw. Moving on, it is the Outworn Ideas going up against the Reichland All Elite, and with the humans effectively avoiding brawls in their previous matches, the Outworn are going to have a difficult time containing the team. It all came down to how well the Tomb Guards could hold up against Reichland's advance, for which after the kickoff, Reichland immediately dive in on the Khemri, finding enough of a gap to get their entire team rushing towards the undead runner. With a quick sack and grab, a touchdown is looking very likely for our living team, but it proved slightly more difficult than they had hoped, as an attempt to stall the clock nearly causes disaster, but they were able to keep their footing as Reichland takes the first touchdown of the match. Going into the second half, with 11 players on both teams, a glimmer of hope lives on, as early removals rapidly gives Outworn Ideas a substantial advantage in numbers, giving them a window to push up aggressively, as Reichland had done in the first half. Opting to attempt the sideline cage rather than risk a breakaway, the All Elite were immediately sandwiched along the edge of the field. It took some bold plays and their superior mobility, but Reichland managed to break free of the noose tightening around them to get a dominating 2-0 lead for the match. With one last drive for Outworn to get on the board, they aggressively attempt to move the ball up the field, with Reichland blitzing their way through the backlines already. But with that maneuver failing, the human team dives onto the ball once more, ending the match at a one-sided 3-0 victory for our top-ranking team. Our next two matches, both unfortunately were not recorded for the match, were the Fragile Bloodmarks versus the Soulless team in Electro Flesh, and the Bouncing Warriors versus the Nuclear Winters. The Elves performed a 1-2 combo in the coachless teams, with the Fragile Bloodmarks winning 3-0, while Nuclear Winters dominated 0-2. Both games were incredibly light on injuries, which is to be expected from teams not interested in brawling, in a fair fight at least. But there was one fatality between these matches, which more than makes up for it.
Let's get the edge up now. Ugh. I have to offer up Berserkers, which is just wrong. As much as I want to put him on the front, he's so useful, I kind of need him.
Finally, to end off our matches for this week, we have the Godlike Puns going up against the Mini Sons of Anarchy. And as hinted last week, what happens when you pair an armor bashy team versus a bashy team with no armor is self-explanatory, for immediately with an aggressive blitz by the Puns, their players were already falling off the field. Fans roared voraciously as blow after blow the injuries mounted rapidly, with even the mighty JT breaking into the backlines to remove the Norse's Yeti, who was the only threat to the Dwarven players. The half was clearly one-sided, with only the Dwarves' own overconfidence being the only threat to their momentum as they risked losing the ball. But with the damage already done, the Godlike Puns were not able to make use of their good fortune and were forced to forfeit the touchdown to their bearded brethren. With only 6 Norse players on the field, the massacre was going to continue for the second half, and despite the Puns relying entirely on Wilhelm Jenny to carry them to a tie, he disappoints his team as he gets tackled down mere feet away from the end zone. While the Puns were able to avoid more injuries, the momentum was gone after that desperate play, as the Sons of Anarchy take down one of the top-ranking teams in a satisfyingly bloody match. So ends the weekly recap for Round 10, with a big change in our top 3 teams, as both How Not to Contain Lizards and the Godlike Puns are dropped down to 6th and 7th place in the seedings, bringing in both the Nuclear Winters and Fluffy Green to brawl it out for 3rd. Reichland are now the sole number 1 team, however, after the Leglickers tied in their match versus How Not to Contain Lizards, putting the ladies in 2nd place. As we move on to round 11 of the season, with Omega Eta Alpha going up against the Brightwings. The Elves may be tricky, but they are still hapless volunteers about to get bashed by a pair of deadly mummies, so hopefully they will lie limping on the ground for us as the undead horde run them over. Match 2 is the Reichland All Elite versus the Jailhouse Rockers. Both these teams are very tricky to pin down, but with the Rockers unable to get the momentum they needed early on in the season, they may suffer terribly for this upcoming match. Only First Degree could possibly save them from total disaster, with his claws and mighty blow. Match 3 is the reanimated Electro Flesh going up against How Not to Contain Lizards, and with our new necromantic team having nowhere near the power of the Greatest Cage, this should very much be a cakewalk for the Lizards. although I doubt they will want to feast too much on the rotten players, so by all means Pirate Joe, make this match quick and painful for our new team. Match 4 is the Nuclear Winters versus Fluffy Green, and while the Orcs are one of the most fearsome team in the league so far, we have yet to see how they fare against the threat that are the Elves. Perhaps Swen's team will be the one to put this menace down once and for all. Match 5 is the Mini Sons of Anarchy versus the Leglickers, and after the beating the Norse have fared against the Dwarves, I worry the Amazons may suffer the same fate. But the ladies have demolished the curse suffering previously in the season, so they may have what it takes to survive and also win the match. Match 6 is the Godlike Puns versus the Cursed Suffering. While the Norse did ultimately survive with no lasting injuries, they are still going into another brawl with the Dwarves. But the Yeti is still their secret weapon, and with a little cunning, they may yet be able to bounce back from their 3-game losing streak. Match 7 is the Bouncing Warriors versus the Large Legends, and while I would like to say the Ogres should roll over our Kislev team, but with them losing against the Brightwings, who the Bouncing Warriors have actually won against, anything could happen in this match. All we fans hope for is there's some blood and violence on the pitch. And finally, match 8, we have the Fragile Bloodmarks going up against the Outworn Ideas. With most of the Tomb Guards having mighty blow, there will likely be a lot of casualties in this match. But as their names suggest, the Bloodmarks are used to being outnumbered, and they have the tools to easily secure victory if the Strength 5 wall of players can't keep the Elves out of their cage. The playoffs are so very close. We are merely just enjoying the appetizer that is the final rounds of the season before the main course is served. Thank you everyone for watching, and have a good night.